Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Menger Institute podcast. Today we have Professor Walter Block. Walter, I want to give you an introduction, but this is what this podcast is going to be about, yourself. So please tell the audience who you are and your story.
Okay. I'm Walter Block. I was born in Brooklyn, and I'm Jewish. And everyone in Brooklyn who was Jewish was sort of a pinko. The big debate was, should you carry a communist card or should you just be a fellow traveler? And that was, left-wing Democrats. And I was like that. I went to school with Bernie Sanders, who is a pretty famous senator. I think everyone knows of Bernie Sanders. And my views and his views were about the same. We both sort of got it from the Brooklyn aura. I changed a little bit, and I'll tell you how I did. He didn't change. His views are roughly the same. And I went to Brooklyn. I went to James Madison High School, and I overlapped 4 years with Bernie, and then 1 year at Brooklyn College. He went off to University of Chicago. I graduated from Brooklyn. And I think it was my third year in Brooklyn, I was still a pinko, lefty, not a commie, but, just unthinking leftist. And then Ayn Rand came to Brooklyn College to speak. And I wanted to convert her to socialism. And she gave a nice speech, well, an evil speech, because she favored free enterprise, which we all know is evil. And then at the end of the speech, they announced that the Ayn Rand Study Club, or whatever group that had invited her at Brooklyn College, was having a lunch in her honor, and anyone was invited, whether you agreed with her or not. So I came to the lunch, and there was this long, long table. Ayn Rand was sitting at the head of it, Nathaniel Branden next to her, Ellen Greenspan, Leonard Peikoff, all of her chief lieutenants. And the only empty seats were at the other end of the table. So I sat there and I turned to my neighbor and I said, socialism is the way to go and capitalism is evil. And he said, well, I don't really know that much about it, but the people who do are at the other end of the table. So I was, I don't know, maybe 22, 21, I forget. Ayn Rand was maybe 50, Nathaniel Branden 35, and I stuck my head in between the two of them. And I said, there's a socialist who wants to debate someone on socialism and capitalism. And Branden was very, very nice. He said, look, there's no room at this end of the table. However, I'll come to the other end of the table with you and I'll talk to you, but you have to agree to two conditions. One, we don't allow this to lapse. We continue until we settle it. And two, you read two books that I'll suggest. And I agreed. And we sat and talked, and I didn't convert him. He didn't convert me. But the two books were Atlas Shrugged and Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And I read those books. I couldn't put Atlas Shrugged down. It just sort of knocked me for a loop. And it's 1,200 pages of little type. And I think I read the whole thing in one weekend, except for Gold's Speech. I never read Gold's Speech. But I've read that book every 10 years ever since. And I always get something more out of it. It's my favorite novel. And Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, I sort of devoted my own book on the Defending the Undefendable series, 1, 2, and 3. It was the same model as Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. But what he had was one lesson, and he had 35 instances of it. Well, that's what I did in Defending the Undefendable, only mine was more libertarian. His was economics. And the libertarian essence is non-aggression principle and property rights based on homesteading. And then you have 35 examples. And then I have 3 books in that series. Well, getting back to my conversion, I was getting ahead of myself a little bit. I went to Branden's house. I went to Ayn Rand's house with my roommates, Ben Klein, Mel Fine, sometimes by myself. And I was converted. The 2 books and the discussion, I hardly even needed the discussion. Those 2 books just knocked my socks off. And to get a little bit ahead of myself, nowadays when I teach a course in intro micro, I use those 2 books plus a textbook. And I figured if it converted me, it'll convert my students, maybe. Who knows? Possibly. And and then I would go to the Ayn Rand Nathaniel Brannon Institute. They had it in the basement of the Empire State Building, then the biggest building in New York City, 100 stories. It was in the basement. And I enjoyed it. I was not an anarchist. I'll get to that later. But I was a minimal government libertarian, sort of like Ayn Rand. Now, she hated the word libertarian. She called libertarians hippies of the right. But she was libertarian. I mean, she believed in limited government. Government should do armies to keep foreign guys off of us, police to keep local bad guys off of us, and courts to determine innocence and guilt. And that was pretty much it. And I believed in that. However, it was a little cultish. I'd go to the meeting, and if you asked a question, a soft, nice, easy question, like on page 43 of one of your books, you said this, could you please elaborate? Oh, that would be a good question. And she would elaborate, or Brandon would elaborate. But then if you said on page 42, you said this, and on page 193, you said that, you know what she would say? She would say, get out. She would kick you out of the meeting. I mean, that's not the way to proceed. That wasn't the way they treated me. Personally, one-to-one or in a small group. But in the large group, they didn't tolerate deviance. They didn't tolerate anything that wasn't, worshipful. So I would get enough of that, and then I would leave. I wouldn't come back for 3 or 4 months. But then I knew no other libertarians, and I'd come back. I was sort of schizophrenic. I'd come back, I'd leave, I'd come back. And then I was now graduating from Brooklyn College. I think I did this in my junior year, and now I'm in my senior year. And I'm trying to think, well, how can I best promote liberty? Should it be as an economist, an Austrian economist? That was another great thing about her. Her big fan was Mises. And, you can't go too far wrong if you like Ludwig von Mises. Menger is good too. Menger started the Austrian schools, and Mises was just a follower. But Mises, Ayn Rand, I don't think knew much about Menger, but she certainly knew enough about Mises. And by the way, Mises was alive then. I don't like to brag, but I shook the hand of Ludwig von Mises, and I never washed it since. It's a little dirty. And if you shake my hand, you channel Mises. Not too many people living today can say that they shook the hand of Mises and never washed it. I mean, a lot of people can say they. So anyway, I was trying to figure out which way could I best promote liberty, as a libertarian philosopher or as an Austrian economist, and I didn't know. So I enrolled in 2 programs: Brooklyn College Master's Program in philosophy and City College Economics. And one semester I take 3 of this and 2 of that, and another semester 4 of 1, 3 and 2, 2 and 3. And then finally I decided it was economics. And I went to Columbia University to get my PhD, and I met Larry Moss. And Larry Moss was a follower of Murray Rothbard. And he said, you got to meet Murray Rothbard. He's an anarchist. I said, what, an anarchist? I don't want to meet Murray Rothbard. An anarchist is no good. And finally, he and his roommate, Jerry Wallows, both of whom later became friends of mine, introduced me to Murray Rothbard. And he converted me to anarchism in about 10 minutes. But he used Henry Hazlitt against me. What he said is, look, you understand why we have to privatize the post office. Yeah. You understand why we have to privatize roads. You understand why we have to privatize this and that and the other. Well, why can't we privatize the police? Why can't we privatize the courts? The private courts are much more efficient than government courts for the same Hazlitt reasons. Why can't we privatize armies? And the light bulb went over my head, and now I was an anarchist in about 10 minutes, and I became a devotee of Murray Rothbard. I don't agree with him on everything. There are a few issues where he and I diverge, but I'm a solid Rothbardian in the sense of, I don't know, we're both Jewish, we're both short and fat, And we both have Christian wives, and we both got PhDs at Columbia. And in many ways, I emulate Murray. I idolize Murray. I mean, I disagree with him on a few issues, but I'm a Rothbardian, and you don't have to agree 100% with somebody to be a devotee of theirs. And then I got my PhD, and I taught at where did I teach at Stony Brook University. I taught at Rutgers University, and then I got a job at the Fraser Institute in Canada, sort of similar to the Menger Institute, but maybe not as rabidly libertarian and Austrian. They were more mainstream, more a follower of Milton Friedman, who isn't all bad. I mean, he's not an Austrian. He's not as rabid as he could be, but, B plus at least, if not an A minus. And then I got fired from them for being too libertarian. And I worked there from 79 to 91. And then I got a job teaching at Holy Cross. And I didn't get tenure there for being too outspoken as a libertarian. And then I got a job at the University of Central Arkansas. And I was there 4 years. And usually they give you a 6-year stint. So if you have a tenure track, you can stay for 6 years. And I was in my 4th year, and I got this job offer from Loyola University. And Bill Barnett was my mentor there. He got me in there. I came in there with tenure. This was the first time I had tenure, and this was in '01. And I was now 60 years old. I was born in 1941. And I've been at Loyola ever since. And I've had some ups and downs. I almost got fired several times for not being politically correct, but I had tenure, and tenure is, pretty important. And here I am. It's now 2026. I've been there for 25 years. And I'm very happy to say that I have about 14 former students of mine who are now economics professors, and hopefully promoting liberty and good Austrian economics. And I have a lot of books, I think around 35, and I've got a lot of journal articles. I'm up to about 800. I'm trying to do 1,000 before I kick off. And I don't know, I don't count how many op-eds or non-scholarly journal. I must have several thousand, because I'm sort of a workaholic. And I do a lot of interviews like this. If you Google me, you'll see me all over the place debating and being interviewed. And I have a lot of op-eds. I've published in the New York Times. Oh, let me tell you my New York Times story. The New York Times interviewed me in 2015. What was their secret goal or their motive? They wanted to show that Rand Paul, who was then a viable candidate for president, is a nut, is a crazy man. So what they did is they interviewed 6 or 8 or 10 people who were associated with him, and I'm one of them, and they try to have a gotcha moment. Gotcha means, I said something crazy. And I'm giving them, what's Austrian economics, what's libertarianism, and either they're not getting it because they're too stupid, which I don't get, which I don't believe. I mean, they're bright guys. They didn't have a gotcha moment, and they kept pushing and pushing. And finally I said anarchism. No, not anarchism. I said slavery, voluntary slavery. So what's going on with voluntary slavery? And here's an area where Murray and I disagree. My son, let's say, God forbid, has a horrible disease, and you're very rich. You're Bill Gates. And the only way to save him is $50 million for an operation. And I don't have anything like 50 million. So we make a deal. I will become your slave. I'll go to your plantation. You can kill me, because under slavery, it was legal to kill the slave. It's like a horse or a cow. When you kill a horse or a cow, you're not a murderer. If you kill a slave, you're not a murderer. So I become your slave. You give my son's doctors the 50 million. I value his life more than my freedom, more than my own life. I think good parents value their kids' lives more than their own. They're willing to die for them. And now I'm your slave. And now the question is this a legitimate contract? Now, there are many people who say it's not a legitimate contract. Robert Nozick says it is. I say it is. Several other people say it is. It's a debatable issue. So you know what the New York Times did? They quoted me as favoring actual slavery. Actual slavery is an abomination. Actual slavery is kidnapping, murder, rape, whatever. In paragraph 3, they said I favored actual slavery. Paragraph 19, they sort of retracted it a little bit. And then the president of my university, Kevin Wiles, S.J., I mean, if I were the president of the university and you were one of my professors and you were quoted in the New York Times as favoring slavery, I'd call you in my office. I'd say, "Tell me you were misquoted." He didn't call me into his office. He just said, "Well, we're against slavery. Bloc favors slavery." Ah. So anyway, part of the I sued them for what was it? Libel. I don't know. In one of my books defending, I forget which one, I said libel and slander is legal. It should be legalized because all libel is, I'm now going to libel you. You take a bath with a rubber ducky. And now nobody's going to be your friend. Your wife is going to leave you. You're going to lose your job. And I've libeled you. Do I have a right to do this? Well, the argument is I don't because I've ruined your reputation. I stole your reputation. But you don't own your reputation, paradoxically. Your reputation consists not of what you think about yourself, but what everyone else thinks about you. And you don't own our thoughts, so paradoxically, you don't own your own reputation. So here I am saying that what is it? The New York Times libeled me. And how can I sue them for libel if I believe that libel should be legal? So I had to concoct some theory because I really wanted to sue them. I mean, they said I favored actual slavery. So I came up with this well, I didn't come up with this. I utilized libertarian ruling class theory. Now, the Marxists have ruling class theory. And for the Marxists, the bourgeois are the bad guys and the proletariat are the good guys. And they believe in the labor theory of value, which is crazy. And they think that the bourgeois is exploiting the proletariat. Well, we libertarians also have a libertarian ruling class theory. Got nothing to do with Marxism. It's rather that there are certain people who rule others, the government, and its cronies. And the Times was a member of the ruling class because they're a spokesman for the government. So I said, it's okay to sue ruling class people or the government for libel, just not ordinary people. So I snuck in there somehow, and I got a few bucks settlement, and I also was able to publish in the New York Times. It's true they would only accept something attacking Donald Trump, and they're very much against Donald Trump. I see Donald Trump as some good and some bad. I mean, he gave a pardon to Ross Ulbricht. Ross Ulbricht was
He founded the Silk Road.
he was put in jail for life for running a blog trying to make illegal drugs easier to buy and sell, which we libertarians favor. And Donald Trump pardoned him. And Kamala Harris never would have pardoned Ross Ulbricht. So, and also I favor what Donald is doing in Israel, which is also very controversial, which leads me to yet another issue. And the other issue is I used to be a fair-haired boy. I don't have much hair, but I was a fair-haired boy for Mises Institute, Ron Paul Institute, Future of Freedom Institute, Libertarian Institute, antiwar.com, and a few others. I spoke at their meetings. I was very heavily involved with the Mises Institute. And all of a sudden, I was excommunicated because I support Israel in its war with Iran, with Hamas or whatever. And that really doesn't bother me that much. But what really bothers me is that people that I've been friendly with for 40 years won't speak to me anymore. And you see, the problem with the Mises Institute is not only do they regard themselves as a Austro-libertarian think tank, but they also regard themselves as intellectuals. I think rightly so. But the way intellectuals are supposed to interact with each other when they disagree, they write an article, they write a book, they engage in a public debate, they talk to each other. You don't say, well, look, you and I disagree, so I'm not going to speak to you. And all my publications with the Mises Institute or with LouRockwell.com disappeared down the memory hole, and they won't speak to me. Not all the Mises people. Some of them will, some of them won't. But I regard that as highly problematic. Let me put it that way. So this sort of is a background story. You asked me to babble on about my life.
Hmm.
This is my life, and I'm still promoting liberty and good Austrian economics, and that's what I do. I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I write a lot and give lectures and interviews like this, and that's my life.
Well, thank you. I want to ask you a bit about your time both teaching at Loyola, but also your friendship and relationship with Murray Rothbard and perhaps other economists in the past. And uh, which topic would you prefer to go? Let's discuss. Let's discuss. I'm super curious about your relationship with Murray Rothbard a bit more because Rothbard, of course, is a prominent Austrian economist and thinker and theorist, and I'm so curious about like, I guess his mind, how he worked, and I know he influenced you a lot, and he was also a workaholic, if I'm not wrong, and how much he was prolific and put out and stuff. So, yeah, if you can just share some more memories about Murray, if you like.
Well, the big problem I had with Murray is stomach cramps. Why stomach cramps? From laughing. I mean, even Buckley, who was William F. Buckley, who was not a big fan of Murray, called Murray and his merry band or something like that. Murray was just so funny, cracking jokes continually in the most inappropriate times. I mean, I regard myself as sort of the part of the living room crowd. The living room crowd was Leonard Liggio, Ralph Raico, Ron Hamaway, Walter Grinder, Jerry Wallows, and Larry Moss, who I mentioned before. And we would sit around in Murray's living room and just cackle. Murray was the sort of person that your parents warned you against. He would stay up late, he would smoke cigarettes, he would drink alcohol, and we would play Risk, it was just hilarious. I got actual stomach cramps from laughing. That's my favorite memory of him. We also read, I think it was not Man, Economy, and State, one of his books that was in typescript, and we were looking for typographical errors. I forget which book it was. It
Was it
couldn't
the
have been Man,
Conceived in
Economy, and
Liberty then?
State. Maybe one of his history books. I forget which book it was. I'm getting senile. I forget things. Um, my favorite memory of him is he was just so funny and he was just brilliant. I mean, I remember one time Murray mentioned that he had an obligation to write something for somebody, and his wife Joey said, "Well, you're supposed to do it by tonight." And Murray said, "What, tonight? I thought it was a week deadline." And then Murray ran into his office, leaving the rest of us, and he typed up something. And in a half hour, 20 pages. He was a good typist, and he was just brilliant. I mean, I don't like to say he was the Albert Einstein of libertarianism because Albert Einstein, everyone says he was great at physics. I don't know physics, so I can't say, but Albert Einstein was a socialist. So I don't want to impugn Murray by saying he was the Albert Einstein of liberty, but he was the father of liberty. I mean, there were people before him. Ayn Rand is older than him. I don't know, Lysander Spooner. There are other people who were there before, but what Murray did is he got three things all put together. One was free market economics. One was a revisionist history, and the other was Austrian economics. And he put those three together. Nobody else had really put them together. You see, there were people, you know, a lot of sometimes when they take a survey of what are your political views, they give you a left-right spectrum. And if you're on the right, all the economic questions are free market. And if you're on the left, all the personal liberties are you answer in a certain way. For example, should we legalize drugs? Yes. Should we legalize sex between consenting adults, whether it's pornography or homosexuality? Or yes, yes. But most people see this as a contradiction. They see that somehow if you're free market or you're libertarian on economics, you should be against liberty in personal relations. And on the other hand, if you're in favor of liberty in personal relations, then you have to be against liberty in economics. And Murray embodied both. And he was a member of conservative groups. Like at one time, William F. Buckley was wanting him to be the regular economic writer for National Review. But then Murray had views on Russia, on legalizing consenting adult behavior, and they couldn't mix. So what Murray did uniquely, Ayn Rand didn't do this. Other leaders of the libertarian movement didn't do this. Ron Paul does it, but Ron Paul is sort of a lieutenant of Murray Rothbard in terms of intellectual stuff. I mean, Ron Paul was, I asked myself, who were the people who converted more people than anyone else to libertarianism? And I come up with three people. Ayn Rand, for my generation, Ron Paul, for maybe the generation a little older than you, and Milton Friedman. These are the people who, I mean, Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises were better than some of these other people in some ideas, but they didn't have as big a megaphone. So you asked me to talk about Murray Rothbard. Murray Rothbard was a genius. He criticized his mentor, Ludwig von Mises, on what was it, monopoly and antitrust. Ludwig von Mises said there could be such a thing as market monopoly with resource. If you own all the gold or you own all the silver or something like that, and therefore there could the market monopoly is not a contradiction. And Murray, I think it was in chapter 9 of Man, Economy, and State, just obliterated that, and I think correctly. So you have the idea that it's okay to criticize your mentors. Friedrich Hayek wrote a foreword to my first book, Defending the Undefendable, comparing me to Mises. I mean, I'm no Mises. I mean, I revere Mises, but I'm no Mises. And I was, 35 years old, and he's saying that I'm like Mises. And then what happened is I wrote a critique of his, what's his favorite book?
The Road to Serfdom?
The Road to Serfdom. I wrote an attack on The Road to Serfdom because The Road to Serfdom wasn't fully kosher. It didn't give the store away, but it gave too much away. And I criticized it. And I wrote that I feel awkward because he was so nice to me. And here I'm attacking him. But I encourage my students to criticize me. I have about 130 co-authored, no, not 130 former students of mine that are in referee journals. And in academia, to be in a referee journal is sort of very good for an undergraduate student. And about 5 of them criticized me. And I'm most proud of the fact that I helped them get published, even though they criticized me. I mean, I couldn't co-author stuff with them because they criticized me. I had one example. I forget the girl's name. She's now a professor. I'm one of my failing professors. She's a lefty. And she attacked me on, what was it? I think the male-female income gap, something like that. And I helped her get into a very prestigious journal. And then I wrote a rebuttal. And the prestigious journal wouldn't publish my rebuttal. They published my student, but not me. So I'm very proud of about 5 or 6 out of this 130, 140 student papers that all started out with term papers for my students that criticized me. So I encourage my students to criticize me, and then I, fight them intellectually in a nice way, and we get it on, and we try to learn from each other. I mean, that's the way you learn by criticizing. I mean, John Stuart Mill is very good on this in his On Liberty, where he said the only way to even understand your own position is to understand the other guy's position. So I don't know. So I make no apology about criticizing Murray on voluntary slavery and on Israel. Murray was a bitter opponent of Israel, and I'm a big supporter of Israel. And there are one or two technical things where I've disagreed with Murray, but I revere Murray. I try to. Murray insisted that everybody call him Murray, and I'm calling him Dr. Rothbard, Professor Rothbard. I mean, he's up here, I'm down here. You have to show a little respect. And now I try to tell everyone to call me Walter because I emulate Murray. And a lot of times when I'm not sure what to do, I ask myself, well, what did Murray do in this situation? And I try to do that. He was my mentor and my friend. I love the man. My wife is very vicious. When I told her about how much I love Murray, she said, well, suppose me and Murray were drowning. Who would you pick? She's a vicious woman, my wife. And I said, Murray, but this is in our early days, and hopefully she's forgiven me for that. I would want to save Murray. Maybe my kids and my wife would come ahead of him, but I'm a big fan of Murray.
How much did Murray read?
How much did Murray what?
Read.
Read?
Yeah.
Oh, he was voracious. I mean, he just read in history and in economics and philosophy and environmentalism and in sociology he got kicked out of the Ayn Rand cult and he wrote a play. Mozart was a red, or something like it. Was Mozart a red? It was sort of a play. So he's a playwright. He was a many splendid person. He was a voracious reader. I was delighted the first time he ever quoted me on a piece that he wrote. He put a little footnote, as Walter Block says, and that was like a big highlight in my life. He was a voracious reader, and I have a friend, David Gordon, who has what do they call it? A memory, a sight memory. What's it called? Will you remember everything you've read?
Oh, a photographic
That's
memory?
it, photographic memory. See, I'm getting senile. I can't think
Hmm.
of words sometimes. Photographic memory. David had that. Murray had something like that. I remember when I first met David Gordon, he said, "Oh, you're Walter Block. You wrote this article in 1992, and it was on page 3." And I don't remember what page or what anything like that. So Murray was not only a voracious reader, but he remembered what he wrote, rather what he read, and he was a voracious reader.
Wow. So you've been teaching at Loyola for 24, 25 years now?
25, yeah.
25, wow. And you've had hundreds, if not thousands of students. Uh,
Well, every semester I have an intro class of, I don't know, 40 or 50, and an advanced class of 15 or so. And I've been there 25 years, so you're better at math than me. You could add it up.
yeah.
Although there are repeats. Sometimes a kid in the intro class comes to my advanced class and takes me 3 or 4 times. Yeah, so I've had a lot of effect on Loyola students and Holy Cross students, and everywhere I've been teaching, except when I was at the Fraser Institute for 12 years, then I wasn't teaching, but I was, trying to convert the Canadians to free enterprise.
Mm. Yeah. So I've met a couple of your students back at the Mises U and AERC conferences, and I've always been super impressed by your students. They've been like just very tremendous, very intelligent. It's been really cool. So I take it that that's a lot of your teaching of them.
Well, maybe they're as good as they are in spite of me. I don't know. You never know the cause, but I am honored to have some very good students who are now making strong names for themselves and promoting liberty.
Um, as a economist and a professor, I want to ask you some advice you would have for writing because you're prolific, um, writing and then teaching or lecturing as well. For economists and up and coming scholars.
Okay. I remember when I first started my writing career, I had writer's block. I'd sit down at the typewriter and nothing would come. And I had a perfectionist hang up. Everything had to be perfect. The eyes of history were looking over my shoulder and going, are you kidding? This is crap. And I had a little sign. I put it on the wall. I said, the next piece I write will be perfect. This one, I'll just do my best. And I think that's good advice for young writers.
Mhm.
Just do your best. No one's perfect, not even Murray, not even Menger, not even Mises. Nobody's perfect. Nobody ever bat 1,000 in baseball or whatever it is. Just do your best. And that's all that we can ask of you is to do your best. And you can do your best and, relax and let it come. A lot of times when I'm writing, all of a sudden I can't write. And what I do is I have chess on the screen, and I look at a chess thing or I play solitaire. And then what I'm telling myself is I'm letting my subconscious work on it because I can't think anymore. I'm sort of out of ideas. And then right in the middle of the chess game, I go right back, and all of a sudden I got it, and I start writing again. So if you get writer's block, go for a walk, go for a swim, go watch a movie, and then come back, and sometimes your subconscious or your unconscious will kick in.
Mhm.
So much for writing. How about public speaking? I went to Albert Ellis, a therapist, a rationally motive behavior therapist, a critic of Freud. He modeled himself on a Greek philosopher named Epictetus or Epictetus. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And what Albert Ellis said is, you really can't change reality much, but you can sure change how you think about reality. And what he said is, I went to him because whenever I would give a public speech, a week before, I'd get stomach cramps, I'd get a dry throat. I would get nervous because I'm not going to give a perfect speech. I never have, never will. I just do my best. And he said, imagine the worst thing that could happen. And the worst thing that could happen is I come into a big audience. There are 500 people. I get a nice introduction like the one you gave me. And everyone was giving me a standing ovation. And I start my speech, and one by one, they all walk out. And in about 10 minutes into my speech, there's no one there, just me. And then Albert Ellis said, well, what do you think about that? And what I thought about is, well, I'll have to work on that speech. Namely, it's not awful. And when I could really think that, then the butterflies went away, the dry throat went away, the stomach cramps went away. And the idea here is when you give a public speech or an interview or whatever, you just do your best. And you're not going to do it perfectly. One of the reasons I like teaching is because when I give a lecture to the class, I can see them next week or the next day, and I can say, hey, I forgot to do this. Whereas when, like in this lecture, I'm going to forget to do things, and after the lecture is over, I'm going to say, oh, I wish I had said that. But with you, it's a one shot. But one of the benefits of teaching is you teach, every week for 15 weeks this semester. And if you forgot something or you said it wrong or you could have said it better, you have another shot. But the key is no teacher is perfect. No one ever gives a perfect lecture. And think if you think that it would be awful and an abomination if you didn't do it perfectly, you're going to have trouble. But if you can convince yourself, well, I'm only human. I'm doing my best. Let the ball fall where it does. Then I think that would be my advice for aspiring writers and aspiring public speakers.
I really like that. To update you, I'm working on my dissertation right now, and under Professor Phil Baggis and Jesus Huerta de Soto, and Huerta wants like a 300-page dissertation and get it published as a book. And I've never written that much before, but I'm working on it. I have about 200 pages, so I'm really excited. It's going well. and I'm trying to put everything into it, like the history of, because it's on the economics of suicide. So I'm going to the history of like the Romans and the Greeks, how they viewed suicide, and then like Saint Augustine coming in and like making it a sin with the Sixth Commandment. So it's all good stuff, but I do have that thought of like, there's so much history. How am I gonna like put all the history into it? And I have to kind of accept that it's not gonna include everything. It's not gonna be a treatise. Uh, but I really want to make it good, you know?
There's I forget the guy's name who does this stuff at George Mason, a Professor George Mason who does stuff on pirates. Do you
Is it
remember him?
Hansen or Brian Kaplan or
Not Brian Kaplan. I forget
Pete
his name.
Becky,
Not Betke. You're getting senile too. I'm
Tyler
glad.
Cohen? No.
No, not Tyler Cowan.
Um,
It's right at the tip of my tongue.
you know what? I went to the George Mason Public Choice Conference like 2 years ago, so I got to meet a lot of their professors, but I didn't I don't recall either. Yeah, senile.
We both think about it after the after the lecture is over. In any case, he wrote an article on the economics of piracy. And then he became the world's leading expert on the economics of piracy from a sort of a libertarian point of view. Well, look, you could do that too. Your dissertation doesn't have to have everything on suicide, but I have a suggestion for you. Include Albert Ellis on suicide and include Freud on suicide. It doesn't have to be just economics. The psychologists and psychiatrists also talk about suicide, so you could talk about that.
Okay, that's a great idea. I
In Canada, they have this thing for kids. It's called a pirate pack, and it's a cardboard thing that looks like a pirate ship. And they put a hamburger in there and stuff. And what I did is I got an extra one, a clean one, and I sent it to him. This unnamed person who neither of us
Peter
can think
Leeson.
of.
I just looked it up.
Who,
Peter Leeson?
yeah, that's it, Peter Leeson. I sent him the pirate ship, and he thanked me for it. So you could be for suicide what he is for piracy.
Yeah.
So don't think that this dissertation has to say everything. This could be the next 10 years of your life where you dig deep into that. I don't say do only that, but
Yeah.
sometimes, Murray Rothbard was a generalist. He wrote about everything. I follow Murray. Peter Leeson was more narrow, and one of the benefits of being narrow is you can go deeper.
Mhm.
One of the costs is you don't do everything. And one of the bad things about being a generalist is you can't go as deep into everything as you could if you just specialized in one. So you have to decide what you want to be. And you look after this dissertation of yours on suicide, that might be the last thing you do because now you're interested in who knows what.
Mhm.
Philip Baggus is your mentor.
My advisor, yes. Yeah.
He's magnificent. He and I had a big fight over what was it, monetary stuff. Him and Jesus Huerta de Soto and
And Holzman?
Howden, Dave Howden.
Okay.
Those three were against me and Bill Barnett on monetary theory.
Okay.
But we're still friends. We haven't told each other that we never want to speak to you again just because we disagreed. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to say that Philip Baggus is, one of the good people, not one of these
Yes.
people that, won't speak to you if you disagree on anything.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. If I may ask, because I'm curious, Professor Hans Hoppe put out a recent article regarding the Mises Institute. Have you read that? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
I'm curious to know your thoughts about that.
Well, he excommunicated me. He wrote this thing, open letter to Walter Block, something like that, saying, you favor Israel, you're a bum. No, no, you know what he called me? He said, what was it? It was a really great saying, a bloodthirsty monster, or something like that. I forget the word. It was a real good 3 words, a bloodthirsty monster, or something like that. No, unhinged, bloodthirsty monster. The man's a poet. I mean, he came up with some good stuff. But look, Hans and I, we're friends. We're co-authors of 4 or 5 articles. We've been friends for 30 years. What's that? I mean, that's not cool. That's not kosher. And based on that, the Mises Institute and many others kicked me out of their ambit. And now he was kicked out of the Mises Institute ambit. So, sort of poetic justice, the excommunicator got excommunicated. As to what he actually said, I thought it was pretty good. What he said, when I got out of it, the Mises Institute has had, for the last 10 years, they've had 5 different presidents. I might not have the exact numbers, but there's been a big turnover in the presidency. And what he says is that Joe Salerno is the vice president, and he's also a member of the board. And when you're a member of the board, you're above the president. And when you're president, you're above the vice president. And he said, that's not a good situation. And he said, Joe Salerno, another old friend of mine who actually will speak to me, so I'm happy about that. What he said is that either Joe should get off the board, or he should become president, or he shouldn't be vice president. And I thought that Hans made a decent point. But then the Mises people excommunicated him. So I'm sort of supporting Hans in terms of his analysis of what's wrong with the Mises Institute. Why do they have this continual turnover of presidents? And I think Tom DiLorenzo is no longer the president. And then there was, who else? Peter Klein, but he was only there for 1 year as a temporary. And then there was, what's his name?
Jeff
Doug
Dice.
French.
Doug French. Jeff
Doug
Dice.
French. And there were 4 or 5 others in the space of 4 or 5 years. I think Jeff Dice was there maybe 4 or 5 years. But maybe over the last 10 years, they've had 5 presidents. I forget the exact numbers and the exact number of presidents and the exact time period. But by the way, I get credit for Jeff Dice being president. What happened when we, and I consider myself at that time part of the Mises Institute, I was part of the inner circle, we were figuring out who could be the president. And I said, let's raid Ron Paul. Whoever is Ron Paul's assistant, let's get him to be the president. I didn't know who it was. It was Jeff Dice. So they picked Jeff Dice, and I think I get partial credit for Jeff Dice being the president of the Mises Institute for a couple of years. And I thought that was a good idea. If Ron Paul likes him, he can't be all bad. He's got to be pretty good. I was friends with Ron Paul. He and I now still communicate, but I'm no longer welcome in the Ron Paul Institute because of the Israeli thing. What the heck? You can't win everything.
Yeah. Uh, this is a joke, and I say this with all due respect, Walter. I think I heard this joke, but you truly are the author of Defending the Undefendable. That's a bad joke. That's a bad joke.
I didn't get the joke. Say it again.
Well, the arguments in this Israel situation is like who's committing a genocide on who. At the same time, I think it's very interesting if, not saying you are, but if someone were to make the case defending genocide, the scholarly scientific thing would be to hear them out, of course.
I still don't get the joke. I get a criticism, namely defending genocide.
Yeah. But that was the joke.
And again, I don't mind sharp criticism from you or anyone else. So, feel free. Like if your view is on the other side, that's okay. We can have a discussion.
Yes.
With regard to the Israeli situation, I'm a big fan of John Locke. And John Locke and Murray Rothbard and Hans Hoppe were all very instrumental in saying that the justification for private property is homesteading. The first homesteader, not the last homesteader, the first homesteader. The last homesteader is a trespasser. Well, who was in the contested area first? The Jews were there about 3,500 years ago. When did the Arabs come? 300 years ago. So the big argument that the critics of Israel offer is that the Jews have been stealing Arab lands. Well, if the Jews have been stealing Arab lands, then the Jews are at fault and the Arabs are in the right, from a libertarian point of view. But from a libertarian point of view, the Jews were there first. They were kicked out by the Romans. They were pogroms, this and that and the other, but they were there first. So, they were the rightful owners. Then the next episode comes up in 1948. 1948, they declare the Jewish state, Israel, and five invading armies come from Egypt, from Jordan, from Lebanon, I don't know, Syria, wherever. I forget which five armies, maybe six. But before they came, you know what they did? They sent out a message. The message was to the Arabs living in Palestine. It was called Palestine then. They said, get out, go away, take a vacation. Why? Because we want to kill all the Jews. And if you're there, we're going to have to worry about you. We're going to have to protect you. We're going to have to distinguish between you and the Jews. So get out, we'll slaughter all the Jews, and then you'll come back in 2 weeks and everything will be hunky-dory. And about 800,000, the numbers are disputed. It's a little less than a million. 800,000 Palestinians left, and the Jews regarded them as traitors because they were cooperating with invading armies, and then they wanted to come back. And Israel said, forget about it. You're not coming back. And this is the second claim against Israel in terms of, I'll get to the genocide in a minute, but in terms of stolen property. You know what? Just by coincidence, also in 1947, 1948, about the same number of Jews left Egypt, left Syria, left Lebanon, left Jordan. Why? Because there were pogroms. And they all came to Israel, and Israel integrated them, accepted them. But did the Palestinians integrate the Palestinians who left in 48? Oh, no. They put them in, I don't know what you call it, concentration camps or camps to show the cruelty of Israel. Well, they didn't want him back. I mean, if a million traitors came back into Israel, there wouldn't be much of a Jewish state. It would be they would turn it over. These Palestinians are interesting people because King Hussein of Jordan also invited them in, and they try to overthrow him. So the Arab countries don't want to integrate these Palestinians, whether it's from Judea and Samaria or from Gaza. Now, look, what happened in 2005? In 2005, there were Jews in Gaza, and the Israeli government said, out. Get out. If you're not out, you can't come back to Israel, or they made it a crime for the Israelis to be there. And from 2005 to 2007, there was a war between the PLO and the Hamas. Finally, Hamas won. And now, for all intents and purposes, you had a Palestinian state. Hamas was in total control of Gaza from 2007 and on. Did they build hospitals? No. Did they build desalination plants? No. Did they build hotels? No. You know what they built? They built tunnels from which people would jump out and engage in suicide bombing. You should mention suicide bombing in your dissertation. You should have a whole chapter on suicide bombing, if I can be so bold.
I do. Yes.
Okay,
I'm
good.
going to mention it. Yeah.
Well, and then they would put rocket launchers in the middle of a hospital or in the middle of a mosque. Now, I'm getting into so what should have happened, all the Jews who came into Israel should have taken over the property of the Palestinians who left. And all the Palestinians who left should have gone to Egypt and Syria to take over the Jewish properties. And then there would have been peace. But no, the Arabs don't want peace. They want to get rid of the little Satan. Now for the genocide. Here are my two children. I'm coming at you with a knife. Here's my knife. Don't worry, it's just a pen. And I'm Hamas. You're a dirty Jew. I'm going to kill you. And I'm rushing at you with my children right here, strapped to the front of me. And you have a gun. And you have a choice. If you don't use the gun, I'm not only going to kill you, but your wife and kids are standing right behind you, and I'm going to kill them too. Or you can shoot me. But if you shoot me, my kids die. Are you going to shoot me? You better. You better, in self-defense. Well, that's what Hamas is doing. Hamas is using its people as shields. It's putting a rocket launcher in the middle of a hospital, and then saying that Israel shouldn't bomb the hospital. And Israel doesn't bomb the hospital. You know what they do? They put leaflets saying, "We're going to bomb the hospital. Go away." And then Hamas won't let them out. And then a lot of civilians die. And guess whose fault it is? It's my fault when you shot me and my kids died. It's my fault. So the genocide is a Hamas problem. It's not an Israeli problem. That would be my answer to Hans Hoppe and all these other people who are Lou Rockwell, who are bitter, bitter, bitter critics. There's this thing called antiwar.com. And Lou Rockwell, on his LouRockwell.com, he has, I forget it, peace, limited government, and good economics, something like that. But we're not in favor of peace. We are not in favor of peace. We're in favor of defense. We're in favor of war, defensive war. Antiwar.com is misnamed. LouRockwell.com is misnamed when it says we're pro-peace. We're not pro-peace. Murray Rothbard favored two wars. He favored the War of 1776 when the 13 colonies left England. And he favored the War of the South when the South wanted to secede from the North. We're not pro-peace. We're pro-war, pro-defensive war, but not offensive war. But who's offensive? Israel is not offensive. Israel is defensive. They keep attacking Israel. Netanyahu had this magnificent quote. I don't know if I'll get it verbatim, but I'll get the gist of it. And he said, if the Arabs put down their arms, there'd be peace. If we put down our arms, we'd be dead. And that's true. If the Arabs would just stop attacking Israel, Israel wouldn't be attacking them. And now it's true, Israel is getting bigger and bigger. Why is it getting? They should have had the Sinai Peninsula. They won that fair and square. Eisenhower made them get rid of it, give it back to Egypt. Look, if my country and your country have a war and you invaded me, and now at the end of the war I have a province of yours, I should keep it. If Canada invades the U.S. and loses Toronto, the U.S. should keep Toronto. Teach those Canadians a lesson and vice versa. So the reason that Israel is expanding the Golan Heights, because they had armaments in the Golan Heights shooting missiles down in Israel. So at the end of the war, they grabbed the Golan Heights. They grabbed what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. So I'm a big defender of Israel. I have a book out with Ellen Fuderman. I have many articles with Oded Ferrant supporting Israel on libertarian grounds.
I have a question. In Rothbard's article in The Myth of National Defense, he discusses nuclear proliferation and how it's like a Mexican standoff. Do you think if Iran were to acquire a nuclear bomb, that could stop the wars going on with Iran? Because then Iran would have a nuke as like an ultimatum, and they'd be able to then kind of leverage a ceasefire in a sense.
I have to tell you another story about nuclear weapons. My son and I, when age 14 or 16, I forget his exact age, we discussed nothing but this. Is a nuclear bomb per se an invasive weapon and therefore should be banned? And what we came up with was yes, on Earth. It should be banned because if it explodes, it'll get everybody. You can't target it. A gun, here's my gun, I can target a bad guy. Even a bazooka, a big bomb, you can confine it to bad guys. Or when you blow up their cell phones, their pages, you can confine it to them. They had pages in their pockets. Everyone would say you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't assassinate. Israel assassinates people. And they also say you shouldn't engage in mass killing. So what is Israel supposed to do? Go like this to its enemies? That was a joke. Not very funny. It was a joke. So anyway, my son and I discussed nothing but this. And what we said is that when we get to Jupiter and everybody's got 10,000 square miles and you want to have a nuclear bomb in the middle of your property, that's okay. Because if it explodes, it'll be confined to your property. But on Earth, forget about it. not even in the Sahara Desert, because it'll percolate all over. So nuclear weapons are per se wrong. Why shouldn't Iran get one? Because they'll use it. They'll use it. Israel's got one, several. It doesn't use it. No one else has used it except the U.S. in Japan in 1945, 46, whenever it was, at the end of the war, which they shouldn't have done. That's a whole other issue. But the reason Iran shouldn't get one is because those people are crazy. Those people will use it, and they'll use it on Israel. And if they did, there'd be no more Tehran. There'd be no more Iran because Israel would reciprocate. And that would be a tragedy. So Donald Trump is absolutely right when he says that, the critics of Donald Trump say, well, he's not clear on what his goal is. One of his goals is to stop Iran going nuke. Another is to stop Hezbollah, Houthis, and Hamas from attacking Israel. Another one is the Hormuz, the part of the ocean. And people say, well, Donald Trump is unclear as to what his goals are. He's very clear. Those are the three big goals: Hormuz, nuclear weapons, and stop terrorism, continual terrorism. Israel has been under attack since 1948, and before that, there were pogroms where masses of Israelis were killed. And now the Israelis in the so-called West Bank, Samaria and Judea, are killing some of the people. They're doing it in self-defense. If those people would stop killing Jews, the Jews wouldn't kill them. The Jews are peaceful. They're a bunch of nerds if they have their leash. That's their inclination, to be nerds, peaceful, argue, yes, verbal argument, not to engage in war, but it's defense. Look, in England, a lot of Jews are leaving England now. Why? Because a lot of Muslims came to England and are now making it rough on the Jews. The Jews of, I don't know, what are we, 2% of the US population and 0.02% of the world? And what's the percent of Nobel Prizes in economics and physics and math and this and that? I don't know, 20%, something like that? Some ungodly percentage. And Europe is trading a bunch of Muslims for a bunch of Jews, in effect.
I think that's a policy of borders and immigration, that's causing all
So
that.
I'm an open borders on immigration. I'm open borders. However, you just can't let everyone in. Look, suppose we had anarchism and we had private defense agencies. What the private defense agencies would do is they would monitor the incoming people. And if they were rapists and murderers, they wouldn't let them in. Well, I'm not in favor of the U.S. government, but as an open borders person, I think that you can't, yeah, you can't be crazy. You have to have some sort of common sense. You can't let murderers and rapists in, and that's what they're doing in what is it, Sweden, where these Muslims are engaging in getting young white girls, telling them that they'll kill their parents unless they engage in sex with them. You've heard of that. This it's sort of an anomaly that I'm an open borders libertarian, and yet I think that Donald Trump is absolutely correct in not following the Biden Barack Obama policy of letting millions of people in, and every once in a while, one of them kills or rapes an American citizen who wouldn't be in this country but for the Biden and Obama policy.
Would it be more accurate to say you're open borders in theory in an anarchist society, but with the statism, with democracies, the nation states, you would want to have.
No, no, no. Even under anarchy, there wouldn't be anyone in.
Right, right. Yeah.
Even under anarchy, the defense agencies would make sure that only legitimate people got in.
Yeah.
So I'm an open borders person for legitimate people,
Okay.
whether it's government or anarchy,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, I mean, but then it's like a bridge, right? I feel like the open borders is like it's conflated with like the leftist idea of like no borders and let everyone come in. I
Well, I'm an open borders person for civilized people, but
got
for
you.
murderers and rapists, I'm not open borders. Sue
Yeah,
me.
got you. Um, well, let me ask you, with the time remaining, what are your current areas of research, and what are you currently writing about and working on?
I'm doing a lot on Israel, a lot. The latest thing I'm doing is very interesting. I got a whole bunch of math professors at Tulane that I'm co-authoring with, and we're trying to mathematicalize Austrian economics. Now, math and Austrian economics is sort of like oil and water, or like a fish and a bicycle. They just don't mix. Why? Because in math, you need smooth curves so you can differentiate and integrate functions. But human action is not infinitesimally divisible. It's, either you buy this pen or you don't buy the pen, or you buy the cough drop or you don't buy the cough drop. You can't buy a millionth or a zillionth of a cough drop. So there's an anomaly. And one person that's done good work on this is Roger Garrison. And what Roger Garrison did, Hayek has the time on the vertical axis. Here's capital goods, here's intermediate goods, here's consumption. Time is on the vertical axis, but the mainstream time is always on the horizontal axis. So instead of basic goods, he calls them earlier goods. It's an attempt to show mainstream economists that Austrian business cycle theory is not totally off the wall, whereas it's less off the wall when the time is on that axis. Well, what my co-authors and I are now trying to do is mathematicalize Mises and Menger and Bombewerk and Hayek and all the main Austrian economists. And we're trying to show that some mathematics requires infinitesimally curves. You can't get around that. But this other mathematics is just pure logic. And as you know, Austrian economics is just building blocks of logic on top of logic. It's praxeology, or logic of praxis of human action. And I'm heavily involved in that. And every once in a while, I'll do another thing for defending the undefendable. I've got another series on privatization, why we should privatize everything, why we should privatize roads, because 40,000 people in the US die, why we should privatize rivers and lakes, why we should privatize space. So I'm into privatization. That's another fetish of mine. And Israel, and then I write op-eds for FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, and other places that still will accept my publications. Many won't anymore. So I'm sort of heavily involved in Israel, but I want to publish 1,000 articles, referee journal articles, and I'm only up around 790 or 795. So I've got 200 more to go, and I'm only 84, and I do about 25 a year. So if I live another 8 years, I'll make it, or 9 years, something like that. So I'm a busy boy, and I try to stay active. I also try to stay physically active. I've had 2 hip replacements and 2 knee replacements, and I told you I used to run track with Bernie Sanders. I can't run anymore, but I can walk. So I do competitive race walking, and I usually win in my age category because
Nice.
I'm the only one in my age category.
Nice.
So that's sort of a précis of my life.
Well, I think then you have a monopoly on your race category. Even in a competition, there's a monopoly there. I'll tell you a story. I'll leave you with a story that when I was studying in Madrid, I had my backpack at a cafe and it was under my feet, under the table. And the only thing in my backpack was Roger Garrison's book, Time and Money. And that backpack happened to be stolen. But the only thing they got was that book. So I like to think that they got a nice lesson on time and money.
Roger Garrison recently passed away.
Mhm.
That's the problem with being 84. A lot of people your age start dying. I mean, they should rearrange things somehow. I'm not sure how, but
Well, I think that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast. I want to interview economists like yourself and, economists who are getting more older in age and to have their stories recorded and online for the world.
I had another thought. My most recent book was most recent article was why are we dying like flies? Why are parents burying children? Why are people dying of cancer? Why are we dying from so many things? And you'll never guess the cause. It begins with the letter G, government.
Yes.
I mean, they have the FDA, which screws up. I mean, I'm dying of cancer, and I want to try your crazy. They won't let me try it because the FDA won't allow that. And you know, Murray Rothbard, one of Murray's keen insights is that we should not add government to the GDP. We should not add government expenditures to private expenditures when we get the GDP. Rather, we should subtract government government's contribution to the economy from the private and get a better estimate of GDP. But we should do better than that. See, if we did that, we'd be twice as rich. If we didn't have government, which is roughly half the GDP. But not only does government take money, but it also makes the economy work less well. So, like Javier Milei, I'm a big fan of Argentina. You know what Javier Milei did? He took my book, Defending the Undefendable, and he gave it to his whole crew,
His cabinet.
his whole cabinet. I'm a big fan of his, not only because of that, but of what he's doing in Argentina. Well, we would be 4 times as rich if we didn't have government, or we had much, much less government. Well, if we're 4 times as rich, we could have a lot more people working on a cancer cure, a lot more people working on heart disease instead of what they're doing, filling out forms for the government. So why are we dying like flies? We're dying like flies because too much government. Too much socialism, too much fascism. I mean, somehow fascism has got a bad rep and socialism is okay. The young people, socialism is great, but socialism just means government ownership of the means of production. Fascism means no government ownership, but heavy control. Hitler was not a socialist, he was a fascist. He wanted more tanks from BMW. BMW was a private company, he would just tell them what to do. So we have socialism, we have fascism, and that's why we're relatively poor. My estimate is we could be quadruply rich if we didn't have all this. And if we were quadruply rich, we'd be a lot further along in curing all sorts of diseases. In my book on roads in the US, 40,000 people die. If we had competing roads, my estimate is we'd have 10,000 deaths. We'd save 30,000 lives a year. So that's my most recent thing right off the hot press. I don't even think I have it published yet. I'm sending it around.
Well, I really like it. Yeah. If I can be a lucky one to receive a copy of that, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, well, I'll send it to you when it gets published.
Thank you. One last question. Were you friends or close with Professor Yuri Maltsev? Because I've been listening to his lectures and I really, really admire his lectures and what he's done. And yeah, I like his work a lot.
Yeah, he and I overlapped at the Mises Institute, the Mises University, rather, and the Rothbard Graduate Seminar
Mhm.
at the Mises Institute. Yeah, he and I were buddies. He also passed away too soon. Yeah, I mean, he came from Soviet Union. He was a economic advisor to these guys. So he knew in a way that no other non-Soviet economists could know from the inside of what the Soviet Union is doing. Pete Boettke has done good work on this stuff, but Pete, I'm sure, would agree with me that he doesn't have Yuri's insight because Yuri experienced it firsthand, whereas Pete never could because he was in the U.S. all the time. Sure, I know Yuri. He and I were buddies. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like his work on socialized medicine, what it really looks like, and he has the cultural Soviet jokes, which are pretty funny.
I have to tell you another story. Ludwig Lachmann
Hmm.
believed in a kaleidoscope, that the economy never reaches equilibrium. Equilibrium is nonsense. I once bought him a toy kaleidoscope.
It's pretty funny.
You're looking at history. And also, I beat Hayek at chess. I played Hayek chess, and if you look on Google it, you'll see a picture of me playing chess with him. And my way of beating people at chess, I say, "Look over there," and I grab their queen. And then, no, I'm kidding about that. So if you're looking for stories about elderly libertarians, some of whom are not here, the Hayek and the Ludwig Lachmann story. Oh, Israel Kirzner. We have to mention Israel Kirzner, who Murray and Israel were seen as the two main followers of Mises, just as Hans Hoppe and I was seen by some people as the two main followers of Murray. And I think part of Hans's animus is he didn't want to share that with me. He wanted to be the only follower of Murray. But that's interesting that sometimes you get a great man and he's got two main followers, like, I don't know, Nathaniel Brannon was Ayn Rand's main follower, or Leonard Peikoff.
Yeah.
Interesting down history,
Yeah.
libertarian history.
Yeah. I like it a lot. And Walter, this has been a lot of fun and a great time talking to you. So thank you for your time, and we'll have you back with the Menger Institute.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
Take care, Walter.
And thanks. And send me a URL for this when you got
Yes.
it.
Yes, will do.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.